Good afternoon, and welcome to the California Association Museum, the California Nonprofits, Cal Nonprofits, and Californians for the Arts webinar on the California Relief Grant for round 4. My name is Jessica Monahan. I'm with the California Association of Museums. I'm joined with several other partners today to share with you the California Relief Grant round 4 eligibility needs and guidance for all of you. I want to pass it off to Tara with California for the Arts to share some additional information.
Can you hear me? Great. Hi, welcome everybody. Thank you for that warm welcome, Jessica. We're going to get started with Jade Alyssa Rivera. She's going to share some information today for us on today's webinar.
Thank you, Tara. So for today, live captioning will be provided for this webinar. Please see the Q&A box for the link, which will open a separate window for the live captioning provided during the webinar. This webinar is also being recorded and will be made available on partner sites on Tuesday for those that are unable to attend a live webinar or need to refer to content while completing their application. As we begin this webinar, we acknowledge and honor the original inhabitants of our various regions. A land acknowledgement is a critical step to working towards Native communities to secure meaningful partnership and inclusion in the stewardship and protection of their cultural resources and homelands. Our institutions were founded upon the exclusions and erasures of Indigenous peoples. We honor and are grateful for the land we occupy and recognize the ongoing damage of settler colonialism. Let's take a moment to honor these ancestral grounds that we are collectively gathered upon and support the resilience and strength that all Indigenous people have shown worldwide. I am on the traditional territory of the Ohlone people. I encourage you to name and acknowledge the Native peoples where you're located in the chat box. And before we get into the weeds with this webinar, we're going to pop a quick poll to see how everyone is feeling about this application process. We're gonna delve into a variety of topics, frequently asked questions, and tips for your application. And we hope that by the end of this webinar, more people feel confident and choose to apply for this amazing opportunity. So while we let people go ahead and fill out that poll, I'm gonna go ahead and pass it to the introductions portion of our session today.
Thank you, Jade Alyssa. We want to welcome first Jan Masaoka, the CEO of Cal Nonprofits.
Jen is not joining us today, but I am.
Thank you, Sue. Would you like to tell us a little bit about Cal Nonprofits?
I'd be happy membership with over 10,000 nonprofit members in the state of California. We are for policies and practices that benefit not only nonprofit organizations, but the communities and people that they serve.
Thank you, Sue. We'll be hearing from Sue a little bit later in the webinar on our questions and answers. Next, I'd like to welcome Celeste Wald, the Executive Director of California Association of Museums.
Great, thank you very much, Tara. Good afternoon, everyone. I am more than happy to welcome everybody on behalf of the California Association of Museums to this webinar, also known as CAM. Like many sectors, physical distancing to prevent the spread of COVID-19 has had a devastating impact on the California museum community, which operates already on thin margins of financial sustainability like lots of other arts and cultural organizations. As we know, normal revenue from admission fees, retail sales, and event rentals have effectively ceased. We are very thankful that our leaders at the state level have recognized this and invested $50 million specifically for arts and cultural organizations through the Small Business Relief Grant Program. What we hope to accomplish today is to have all of you understand what the steps are to apply and try to make this process as smooth as possible. CAM has 1,200 individual and institutional members that are located in almost every county across California and include art and history museums, science centers, natural history museums, cultural centers, zoos, aquariums, children's museums, and botanical gardens. Our membership represents the breadth of the museum field, from small, all volunteer run museums in rural locations to world-renowned institutions in urban areas. Our mission is to unify and strengthen California museums for collective impact, and we work diligently to support stronger museums for stronger California. We believe that museums contribute to healthy, viable, and sustainable communities across our beautiful state. The funds being allocated through this grant program will help museums and other cultural institutions sustain themselves financially as they continue to serve their communities in reflecting, responding, and recovering from this global health crisis. So thank you for attending today. I look forward to learning along with you.
Thank you, Celeste. Next, we'd like to welcome Julie Baker, the Executive Director of Californians for the Arts.
Thanks, Tara, and thanks, Celeste, and to Sue, and to Jade Alicia, and the whole team that put this webinar together very quickly to meet the needs of the field, to make sure that you are informed and that you can make the best application possible to get the California Relief Grant Program that is only for nonprofit arts and cultural institutions in this fourth round from the state. Quickly, we are two organizations, Californians for the Arts, which is the only comprehensive multidisciplinary organization here in the state of California, focusing on advancing and building public awareness of the value and impact of arts, culture, and creativity across California. Some of our programs include Arts, Culture, and Creativity Month, which was a Senate concurrent resolution adopted in 2019 to be every April here in California. This is really an opportunity for the sector to come together, not only to celebrate, but to also lift our voices together in advocacy for the field. California Arts Advocates is our direct lobbying organization. We develop strategies and policies and employ a lobbying firm to directly influence funding and legislation for the arts and creative industries. Together, our organization represents hundreds of members and thousands, tens and thousands of arts organizations, individual artists and culture workers, for-profit organizations, the entire ecosystem that makes up what makes a very healthy and very impactful creative industries here in the state of California. Go to the next slide. So our wonderful board president, Victoria Hamilton, has a terrific quote around collective advocacy, which is, to be an effective arts advocate, we need to speak with one voice. And I'm very pleased that to get to this place of where you see $50 million in funding only for cultural institutions, the only industry that was called out in the governor and the legislators package of over $2 billion in relief for small businesses, was due to the work of organizations like California Association of Museums, like California Nonprofits, and like California Arts Advocates. Together, we were able to really share the impact of what has happened to our sector, the disproportionate impact in terms of being shut down for over a year now, and without right now specific guidelines to reopen to full capacity. So it's really important that we continue to do that. We couldn't do that without your voices in supporting the work that we do. So we thank you so much for everyone who sends in the letters that we send out in action alerts and works with your elected officials to let them know what's been happening to our sector. And next slide. So what is the Arts and Culture Program? It's Governor Newsom, as we said, signed into law on February 23rd, a comprehensive package providing urgent relief for the small businesses of California. And part of this package will be allocated to a new program, and that's the only one. March 16 through 23 opens tomorrow for certain eligible nonprofit cultural institutions, which we will go through today, what the eligibility is. And it is just for the 1 week, and they'll be very clear about this, but you definitely have to create a new application. This is only for this round. So thank you for being here today. We're excited to get this up and running, and we are all here to help. California Association of Museums, Cal Nonprofits, and Californians for the Arts are here to support you. We have webinars every day this week, as well as open office hours, and all of us are available by phone and email. So thanks so much.
Thank you, Julie. Next, we have Kent Monfort from Lendistry. Welcome, Kent.
Thank you, Tara, and hi, everybody. So we're operating in the background, you might say, processing literally hundreds of thousands of applications. We are the second largest community development financial institution in the country. We have a very robust IT infrastructure and really specialize in kind of an internet application process that works really quite well for programs like this. So this will be, in the last year, probably our 12th or 13th program. And of course, all-encompassing California Relief Grant will be at least 6 rounds of funding and over $2 billion. So it'll be a massive effort, the largest we've done to date. And we'll do our best. It's a 24/7 job, but we'll process as many as we can, as quickly as we can. And I think as it relates to the arts and cultural program itself, round 4, even though, I mean, $50 million is significant, and it's nice to have that kind of a industry focus. I feel quite confident in saying we are ready to roll and can easily handle that amount of volume over the next 5 to 7 days. So looking forward to doing that.
Kent, can you walk us through people who might have applied previously through other rounds and talk a little bit about how this round 4 fits into the larger picture of all of the other
Sure.
rounds that have been made accessible?
Yep, happy to do that. It's it does it leaves a little question in applicants' minds as to what do I have to do, and do I have to keep doing it in order to have a chance at a grant? But in a nutshell, so far we've had 3 rounds of funding for both for-profit and nonprofit entities. And if that applicant applied in round 1, but for whatever reason, didn't get selected or approved, they were automatically rolled into round 2. And the same thing there, if they're not selected in round 2, they're automatically enrolled into round 3. So there's really nothing that they need to do in terms of the application process. You only do it once. They do have to upload the documents that are required. But other than that, we'll be reaching out to them to let them know what is needed. Now, here's where it gets interesting, because as Julie mentioned, the round 4 is a completely different program. In fact, we're probably better off just calling it the Arts and Culture Program, not to be confused with prior rounds. With the Arts and Culture Program, round 4, an applicant, if they have already applied previously, would still need to apply again for the Arts and Cultural Program, because it is a separate program. They have to reapply a second time specifically for this program. And then obviously an applicant who's new, who hadn't applied, would still need to apply in order to be eligible for the Arts and Culture Program. And they would have to be an entity that was involved, obviously, in arts and culture. That would have to be classified that way in order to participate. So just backing up a bit, if you were approved in round 3, then essentially the way it works is we then go in and validate the documents that you've uploaded to the portal. And if we can check the box on all the documents, it all looks good, then we'll email out a grant document for you to sign, DocuSign, and a W-9 form for you to sign. And generally, within 5 to 10 days after you sign those documents, the money is ACH'd to your bank account. And that will be true of new applicants to the Arts and Cultural Program. Once they've uploaded their docs, we'll validate them, we'll send them an email with a grant document to sign, and then 5 to 10 days later, we'll send out ACH the money to their bank account. Now, the particular slide that we're looking at here on the screen, it essentially kind of covers what I've been saying. Maybe it shows it a little bit differently. But what it's trying to point out is that you're either going to be an existing applicant who's already applied in rounds 1 or 2 or 3, or you're a brand new applicant, a nonprofit 501c3 maybe, who has yet to apply for the Arts and Cultural Program or for any additional round in the future. And so kind of going from left to right from the top, if you're already applied to round 3, there's nothing you need to do to get to round 5. You'll automatically be moved to round 5 if you're not approved and selected in round 3. And then, of course, if you're not selected in 5, you're automatically moved to round 6, whether you're a for-profit or a nonprofit. Now, if you're an arts and cultural applicant, you have to apply again. Even if you applied previously, you have to apply for this round. And when round 4 is over, if you haven't been selected, you're done in terms of the Arts and Cultural Program. You need to reapply for round 5 in order to be eligible for a grant there. And then if you're not selected, you're automatically moved to round 6. So hopefully that doesn't make things more confusing, but the idea here is that we want you to do as little as possible, except for the added case of round 4 arts and cultural applicants, where you do have to apply a second time.
Thanks so much, Ken.
Thank you, Ken.
Sure.
This is Jessica Monahan of California Association for Museums. She's going to walk us through the next part.
Thanks, Tara. Kent kind of started the discussion, and I want to continue that because this round is special and specific to arts and culture organizations. So you're asking, if you're sitting on this webinar, you may be asking yourself, do I qualify? And there's a lot of different factors that make you qualify. You have to be an organization that is registered as a 501c3, and no other arts and cultures options exist for round 4. You must be a 501c3. You have to have been in operations prior to June 1 of 2019. Now, what does being in operations mean? That might mean that you filed your articles of organization of that kind, before that time. That's what you'll need to do. So Lendustry will need evidence that you were in operations prior to June 1 of 2019. You must currently be active and operating, or because many of our organizations have been shut down, have a clear plan to reopen when the state permits the reopening of business. And that may be specific to your county or your region based on the tier colored levels that have been outlined by the state. The other piece that's really important is the intent of this grant is COVID relief. It is relief for organizations and arts and cultural organizations that have been impacted by necessary shutdowns. So your organization must have been impacted by COVID-19 and the related health and safety restrictions, such as business operations, closures, things that resulted in closing or shuttering, inability to offer programming as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And if you're an organization that has multiple operations, it is the location or franchise with the highest revenue in the group. For most arts and cultural organizations, that will not be all that popular, but I do mention it because especially it applies to sometimes organizations that have multiple outlets or partners. Other pieces, so let's continue that. When we already said you must be a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Also, you also have to have eligible codes that are outlined in the bill that was signed by the governor. NACIS codes are traditionally codes that are used by businesses in the lending community to track data. Nonprofits rarely use NACIS codes. However, for this grant, you'll need to, in order to be eligible, fit into one of these 15 identified NACIS codes that were hit through the pandemic particularly hard and were included in this specific round for round 4. So if your organization specifically qualifies as a dance company, a historical site, a museum, a nature park, or other similar institution, and as a 501c3, your organization qualifies, pending they meet all the qualifications. People have asked us, how will your NACIS code be verified? Lendistry, the granting partner, will be verifying NACIS codes specifically through your organization mission statement, which is often found on your 990, and other public documents. So I could not say I'm a arts organization and have a different code. So they're going to look specifically at the code that you certify as part of the application certification process and compare that with the code that you identify that relates to your mission statement. And if you have questions about NACIS codes after this, please keep them coming and feel free to send them to us. People have asked, what can my funds be used for? So, many of our organizations were eligible for PPP and other funding that was made available previously. So all employee expenses for this grant, including payroll costs, healthcare benefits, paid sick or family leave, and insurance premiums are eligible as use of funds for this grant. You cannot use this grant to cover the same funds that were used for other grants. So basically it means you cannot double dip on funds. This is the same as it is for lots of other grants that we're familiar with as organizations. So if you received PPP for a period of 10 weeks, you can't use the same funding to cover it during this grant period. However, if you have an additional period of time, that works okay. Working capital and overhead, including rent, utilities, mortgage principal and interest payments, and debt obligations prior to March 1 of 2020. Basically, the ink had to have been signed on the mortgage or on the lease prior to March 1 for it to be eligible, but it can occur after that time. Costs associated with reopening business operations after being fully or partially closed are also eligible. Think about things like PPE, plexiglass, testing, employee training, thermometers if you choose to go that route. All of those kinds of equipments, training for your staff is all eligible. And any other COVID-19 expense that has not been covered through other funding sources is eligible. Now, how much money is eligible? You might be asking yourself. Grants to eligible organizations will be prioritized based on documented percentage of revenue declines based on a reporting period between Q2 and Q3 of 2020 versus Q2 and Q3 of 2019. They're looking for you to demonstrate that your organization was negatively impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. And those organizations that have the greatest percentage of revenue decline are going to be most likely to be funded. Grant ranges between $5,000 and $25,000 based on annual revenue. There is no income revenue limit for this round of funding. There is no revenue limit for this round of funding. Previous rounds had a $2.5 million limit. The legislation allocates that there is no limit to revenue for this round of funding. So therefore, the only other figure you have to have is you have to have at least $1,000 of gross revenue based on your 2019 taxable year. The other piece that you'll have to be coming up with is at some point after you finish the online application that Tara is going to talk about next, you will need to complete that online grant application that opens tomorrow, Tuesday morning. So for stage one, as far as documents you're going to need, and this is important because all of you will need to be working behind the scenes to pull these documents together and make sure you have them. You'll need to complete the grant application that opens online on Lendistry site tomorrow. You have 1 full week to complete it. and it is completed in one shot, so you can't go back and change and edit. Tara will talk more about that. But that is the very first piece you need to do. Also, you'll want to pull together your financial organization documents and an application certification after you complete your online application that basically certifies and acknowledges that that information is accurate to the best of your knowledge. Other pieces that Lendistry will request from you is an application certification, which we just talked about, a 2019 tax return. For most of you, that will be your 2019 990. A government issued photo ID of the individual authorized to apply on behalf of the organization, and evidence of minimum gross annual revenue of at least $1,000. For many organizations, that will come from the organization's 990 form, line 12 specifically. However, for smaller organizations who may file a postcard 990 or other forms, they will need to provide evidence of minimum gross annual revenue of at least $1,000 in other forms. I want to pass it off to Tara at this point to talk specifically about the online application, what you can expect tomorrow, and how to prepare in advance for the types of questions. We'll talk more about document uploads, and we're going to ask Kent to talk more about the online portal and some tips and tricks. But for right now, Tara, I want to pass it off to you to talk about the application, the online application, and what people can expect and how they can prepare for it. It's very different than other grants that nonprofits are traditionally used to applying for.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jessica. I'm not going to go through the entire application, but what I would like to do is highlight some areas for you. So the first thing I want to talk about is that the authorized representative is whoever is legally authorized to sign on behalf of your nonprofit. You should know this information via your legal documents, and that's who would be filling out this application. The next thing that I want to talk about is your business name. That should be your legal name of the organization, not the one that you use on social media necessarily, but your legal name. And then something that's very important and very unique is that if you have applied in either of rounds 1, 2, or waiting in round 3, and you would like to reapply as a nonprofit arts and culture organization, as long as you have not been funded, there's no problem. You're welcome to do so. You do need to use a unique email address here. The Lendistry system does not respond well to multiple applications with the same email address. So you'll need to use a unique email address. That's very important. The other thing you need to know is that when you use your email address, you want to make sure that it's not anything that would go into spam, like nothing like info at, nothing like that. You want it to be a unique email address that is not like spam related. Next, when we move on, you're going to want to, down here on the bottom left, you see, I accept the text policy. When you put your phone number in, if you want to be receiving texts, you want to make sure that the phone number you put in actually receives texts. That's what you'll want to do there. Let's go to the next page. And on page 2, the application is going to be about the individual who is applying. So that's that authorized individual. On here, you want to use the same email address that you've selected as your unique email address. And then you're going to want to make sure that the physical address, that the date of birth, all this information is for that unique signer. Now, they are asking for personal information. And that's because per requirements of federal lending, they need to make sure that nobody is on the Office of Foreign Accounts Control, or OFAC list. That's the only reason. They are not going to be, they're going to have a soft credit check, which means that it will not impact the person's credit report. And it also means that the person's credit does not impact your ability to be funded. So just so you know that. I think we can move to the next slide now. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed one thing. On ownership, most likely it's a 0% ownership because it's a nonprofit, but you want to make sure you put that in correctly for yourself. And then on the next page, if you do have a DBA, you're going to want to make sure on that top right-hand side to go ahead and put in the DVA. And then you can apply if you've applied in earlier rounds. And in fact, if you have not yet been funded, you must reapply if you are eligible as a 501c3 for this round of funding. And as Kent mentioned, if you're not funded, you will be automatically rolled from your original application into round 5. The other thing I want to mention, I've had a lot of questions about if we accidentally applied as a for-profit when we're a nonprofit, those kind of things. If you find the need to apply in round 5, then you're going to want to reapply and correct that issue at that time. Let's see. If you have, everyone will be informed as of, anyone that's applied already will be informed as of today, whether you are waitlisted or you've been awarded. If you do not receive any communication from Lendistry by the end of day today, you're going to want to contact them as soon as possible, because that means something's going on with your application. The Lendistry phone number, in case you need it, is 888-612-4370. Okay. And then when we get down into the business side of things, you're going to want to tell us about what does your business do? Now, when this is all about demographics, they're correcting. And when that pulls up, you're going to see that many of these things are listed might not seem directly applicable to you. You're going to want to pick the one that's best for you. Is it service? Are you doing a service organization, or are you unknown? Those are probably the 2 choices you're going to select from. Next, when we get into what type of business do you have, it starts listing personal services, a bunch of different things. Now, depending on the focus of your organization, you might choose any one of these, other than, I'm assuming, auto repair. And so you just want to pick the one that's closest to your needs for your organization. Then we come over next to tell us more. And on that drop-down menu, you'll see, again, several options. One of those options is about education, social, or arts. Your organization might fall into any one of those categories. So please select the one that applies best for you. Then Jessica already mentioned this about the NACIS codes, but you'll see a drop-down menu. These are the NACIS codes that have been approved via legislation. Choose the one that best applies for you. We understand that your specific NACIS code that you put on your 990 may not be listed. They are trying their best to get funding out. Choose the one that best applies. And if for some reason you're not available, that one's not available for funding, then you do have the option to apply again in round 5. The rest of the demographic questions around women-led business, ethnicity, veteran, my advice would be to look at your staff and your board and pick the best answer for your organization based upon those compiled demographics. Next, we go into the next page. The purpose of the grant will drop down. You can select the one that you think is most appropriate. Now, the timeline for expenses is March 2020 forward. Any expenses that are COVID related. So as long as Jessica mentioned, as long as it isn't something that you already got funding through the PPP and you paid your rent or your payroll, any of these apply. And you can use your funding for something a little different as long as it's an approved expense after you've submitted the application. That's not a problem. Let's see. You'll want to select the amount that is appropriate based on your gross revenue and put that in there for yourself. And then you're going to want to go down next and put in your information on tax return, those kind of things. I've been asked several times because I know that many nonprofits don't follow a calendar year on their tax returns. They still want your 2019 tax returns. I know some of you have filed an extension. You're going to want to get those in. That doesn't affect your ability to apply, but should you be selected for funding, that will be required to receive your funding. Then we're going to go on to some disclosure statements. Those are primarily yes/no questions, and you're just going to want to select the answer that's appropriate for you. And you see here on number 4 and 5 that they are requiring the financial information from fiscal year quarter 2 and 3 for both 2019. They don't want your fiscal year as if you have an odd year. They want the actual calendar fiscal year. So it's going to be April 1 through September 30. The bottom one, you're going to want to answer just based on if you've received PPP or other local emergency funding. And we can go next to the next page. And this is when we start getting into knowing if our application is complete. If your application is not complete, you will not see this box that says upload documents and bank information. And then you know you need to go go in and correct that so that you are receiving this little note. As Jessica mentioned, it is best to have all of your documents ahead of time, go through this one time and have it complete and avoid having to do any kind of checking back in. Once you have got this button, it will open up a tab and it will show you these orange buttons on the side that let you know that those are the documents that are pending. If you have applied before, when you've uploaded all your documents and it was previously complete, you may now see orange buttons in the prior application under this separate email. That just means they want you to separate out your documents into individual uploads, and that's all that means for that prior application. In this case, with this current round 4 application, once you've uploaded each document, it will then turn the button to green and say completed. Now you'll see that the second one down is the application certification. You'll have to go in, print the application certification. It's one of the buttons available on the website. Initial the document, sign it, scan it, and then upload it in that page for pending documents. That's how you'll know that you're complete when you're done with all of those things. I think that's it.
I know that some of you are probably watching this and going, this is kind of dry information. This is very unfamiliar to, I think, a lot of nonprofit organizations. There is no narrative. There are no larger goals. It is a very technical and application that is just really based on information that we've just discussed. You don't need to provide what you would normally provide in what nonprofits see as traditional grant applications.
Yeah, it's actually just their goal really is to hand out the funding, and it's based on an algorithm. And it might help you to know that it's based on a perspective almost like a banking or a lending application versus what we as nonprofits normally see as grant applications. I want to address 2 things that have come up in the questions. One is, do you have to have a brick and mortar building to apply? You do not. You simply have to be an eligible 501c3. And the other one is about fiscal sponsors. Unfortunately, for this grant, you do have to be your own 501c3, and fiscal sponsors is not an eligible option. Now I'm going to invite Kent back to talk about some tech tips on getting through the system.
Thank you, Tara. So after so many applications that we've looked at, there's a handful of kind of common tricks or tips, if you will, that we recommend you doing just to avoid some of the delays and challenges that you might have when you're online trying to apply. So the first one has to do with the browser that you use, and you can use any browser for that matter, but we've just found that for whatever reason, Google Chrome seems to work the best. It has the least amount of issues when you're applying. So if you don't have it already, there's a link here you can click on to download that browser. The next tip we've kind of touched on earlier, we just prefer that you use your either personal or your regular business email. Don't opt for one of the more unique emails that's info at, or the company name at contact, or company name at no reply. Not only will it make the application process harder, it may in fact stop the application process, but it keeps us from being able to reach out to you with a status update or other emails, because they tend to just bounce back to us. So ultimately it delays the process, delays your funding. Tip 3 is also kind of important. And surprisingly, we get just a ton of documents uploaded that are simply pictures taken from a phone, one page at a time. Each page is its own file, not really given a name per se, and all uploaded to the same location in the portal. And you can imagine, like with a tax return, if it has 20, 30 or more pages, that's a lot of files. And sometimes those files don't open up. They're not readable. The right side is cut off, or the bottom third is eliminated, and it all needs to be done again. And so we prefer that an applicant, if they have a scanner, of course, use that scanner and scan a document with all its pages as a single PDF. And if you don't have a scanner, take advantage of these one of the 2 links below that you can download. It's free. They're great applications that allow you to scan a complete document and give it a name. It'll definitely help quicken the process. Tip 4 is kind of surprising. It seems obvious that you can't move forward unless you complete the application, but we do see a lot of applications that remain unfinished. And so we want you to know what the email looks like. Once you save an application, if you haven't finished it, within a few minutes, you'll get an email that'll say incomplete. It'll highlight that. Incomplete. It'll have a button to click on so you can go in and edit. Maybe you put something in that was wrong, or maybe you just took a break and didn't finish it, but it will allow you to go in and edit that application. The image below is what you'll see in an email if your application is finished. So that part of the process is over. All you need to do now is start uploading those documents, the 4 or 5 different documents that are required. Tip 5. Tip 5 is so there are definite issues with computers because they are programmed to store your keystroke information. That data resides in your cache memory. And what happens, whether you're dealing with Lindustry in this grant application or any other business that you might be dealing with or applying for, they'll often make changes and updates and revisions to their side in their system. And the keystrokes that are memorized in your computer no longer match what their computer expects to see. There's kind of a misalignment. And if those keystrokes, the history, that data of those keystrokes doesn't line up, you'll get user errors or like a password error. I get those myself even, and you think, well, I know this is the password, and you type it again and again. Well, the reason it's not accepting your information is because your data that is stored historically, that keystroke data no longer matches what the other side expects to see, and it creates an error. So you can follow this guideline to go in and erase your cache memory, and it will eliminate the potential for this problem. And the final tip here is it's similar, frankly, in that the computers remember your browsing history, and whether you're looking at a website or images on a website, or you're picking up cookies from that website, all of that is stored in your cache memory. But if you switch your programming to incognito mode or private mode, your keystrokes as you type them are no longer remembered. And so going forward, it would eliminate the potential for that error. That's all we have here. And I would just say that as an aside, the tip of using the call center, the 866 number, 12 hours a day, 5 days a week, use that number. It's easiest to get in early in the morning or late in the evening, like any call center. Otherwise, you'll be on hold for a few minutes, but whoever picks up will be able to help you with your issues. And maybe as a final reminder, turn off your pop-up blocker because, for instance, a little box when you're done with the application will pop up and say, are you done? Do you want to submit? But if your pop-up blocker is there, it might stop that box from appearing. So turn that off and it'll eliminate the potential for problems. And that's it. Look forward to distributing a lot of grant money.
And I would remind everybody, if you had applied in previous rounds, to make sure that you don't use the same email so that your applications don't get tangled between round 2 and round 4. So use another email address. That's a big tip and will save you a lot of headaches.
Thank you, Kent. Thank you, Jessica. And now I'd like to invite Sue Sigler from California Nonprofits to go over our frequently asked questions.
Thank you, Tara. And we selected just a couple of the most frequently asked questions that we're hearing from applicants for the program. And the first of those is, why do I have to provide my personal information when I apply? And Jessica touched on this earlier, that the personal information is a way to verify your identity. It is used as fraud prevention in the program, and it is not intended to check your personal credit or otherwise inconvenience you. It is highly unusual for nonprofit organizations to be asked to supply this information. And so we wanted to highlight why that is being asked. It is much more typical in the small business environment, which of course is where Lendistry typically operates, and where the legislation was originally for small business, with nonprofits and cultural and arts organizations added later on. We also heard it touched on earlier, but we can't say it enough about, if you already applied in round 1 or round 2, what should you do next? You should know by the end of today what your status is with Lendistry, because Lendistry was sending out emails about the wait list. So if you have not yet heard anything from Lendistry, you'd want to check in with them. But if you were waitlisted in rounds 1, 2, or 3, you must reapply in round 4, because as was mentioned earlier, round 4 is a unique program with a unique application. If you're declined following round 4, you may reapply again in round 5. And again, there's a different application, which is why you need to reapply. I also wanted to mention that the way that Lendistry determines your annual income is from your 990 form. The determination of your annual income is important because that will show that you are eligible for the program of having over $1,000 a year in annual income in order to qualify. And that's easily done if you file the long form 990, where your gross revenue appears on line 12, or if you file a 990 EZ, where your revenue appears on line 9. But if you file one of the short forms like the postcard, that does not list your gross annual revenue, and you will need to provide additional documentation. One of the ways to do that is to visit the Attorney General's website for charitable registrations and obtain a copy, if you don't already have one, of your RRF-1, which is the state form that nonprofit organizations file annually with the Attorney General's office in California. If you need a link to that, we have frequently asked questions on our website at calnonprofits.org that contain a link to the RRF-1. And then one of the other questions that I get most often is, how do we look at employees versus contractors? Many arts and cultural organizations employ a lot of independent contractors. And so the answer to the question, do independent contractors count as employees, is no. The reason for that is those independent contractors are eligible to apply as a small business on their own behalf. And when you get to questions about how to look at your employees, remember that the number of employees that you have is as of December 31st, 2020. And the number of jobs retained or created is the number of people that you either found new jobs for, or in your organization, or who were laid off and were recalled during 2020. So Tara, back to you.
I think we're going to take a couple of questions, the most commonly asked questions. Addie's been managing our Q&A box behind the scenes answering a lot of questions. And there are definitely going to be specific questions that come up. But Addie, was there anything that you feel like came across a lot of questions that you feel like maybe we could send Sue's way or try to answer before we move on?
Yeah, let me know if you can hear me. I think a main question that I saw come up again and again was that people were asking how to figure out if an organization matches a NACIS code. It seems like it requires some interpretation and is not always exact. What's the wording?
So that is correct. It is not always exact, and it can be difficult to determine precisely what your NACIS code is. It is important to recognize that the application partners cannot tell you what your NACIS code is. That is a judgment call you will have to make yourself, because you need to sign that application certification saying that you did your best to identify your NACIS code. I will say, however, that there's some late-breaking information for me today, which is I just learned that the U.S. Census Bureau operates a helpline where you can call and get help identifying your NACIS code. And again, I learned that just before the webinar today. So I'll provide that information to all of our partners here, and it'll be on our website in our frequently asked questions as well, where you can call to get the U.S. Census Bureau to help you identify the correct NACIS code.
But regardless of what your NACIS code is, the only 15 NACIS codes are eligible for round 4. So if your organization falls outside of that NACIS code, you'll want to be applying in round 5, which will open up after round 4 closes.
Thank you. One other question that I saw a lot were people asking if their 2019 990 isn't complete, can they use a 2018 990?
And the answer to that is in rounds 1, 2, and 3, that was permissible. Let's remember that rounds 4 through 6 were created with separate legislation and some separate requirements. And so unfortunately, the answer to that is no. The only thing that is acceptable in rounds 4, 5, and 6 is your 2019 form of 990.
Thank you. And then maybe one last question I'm seeing at the top of the Q&A box is the definition of revenue, if it is gross revenue or earned revenue.
It is gross revenue that encompasses all of your types of revenue, exclusive of other government provided COVID relief funds that you may have received. So if you received a PPP loan or grant, or funds through the EIDL program, perhaps a municipal or county program in your area, you do not need to include those in your gross revenue. You will later in the application be asked to list those types of support. And if you don't have enough room, enough lines on the application to list the types of government COVID-related relief that you received, you can simply list it on a Word document and upload that with your other documents. I also get a lot of questions about folks who have had extraordinary things happening during extraordinary times. And by that, I mean, perhaps your organization received a major gift from an angel donor, or you got some pass-through revenues to share with the people that you serve. And I get the question, can those be backed out because they're extraordinary in 2020? And unfortunately, the answer is no. You have to include all of your revenues, regardless of source, with the only exception being what I mentioned earlier about the government related COVID relief funds.
Thanks, Sue, and thanks, Addie, for handling those FAQs. Tara, I think now would be a good time to share some of the other resources that are going to be available, because we won't get through all of the questions.
Yes, that's a great idea. Yep. We wanted to thank everyone for joining us today. And here you'll see listed our contact information, whether it's for California Association of Museums with Jessica, Cal Nonprofits with Sue, or Californians for the Arts with myself. We have been, I see that Addie has been typing away frantically to answer all your questions and answers, and I've even tried to jump in when I could here and there, as has Jadalissa. We don't have them all answered. Hopefully the majority of your questions were answered. We will go through those because we want to respect everyone's time, and we just have 6 minutes left now. We will go through those, and if there are any that we think we need to send back out, we do have the list of contact information. We'll send that to you. This webinar will also be made available on the Californians for the Arts website. And we will be having webinars every day this week as well, in case you know anyone that needs to join one. Jessica, Sue, is there anything else you think we want to make sure to add? We can just keep going down the questions until time runs out.
Let's get those questions answered.
Okay, great. Let's see.
One other question is there a way to see our original applications from previous rounds, like round 1?
Unfortunately, there is not. When you go through the first part of the application, and you at the end of that, you'll see a button that says submit. When you select the submit button, you can no longer return the application pages. A couple of things I would share, which is that once you have made it that far through the application, you've completed part 1 and you've hit submit, you have made an on-time submission to the program. We hope that you'll go on at that part and upload your documents, because it will allow for much faster processing of your application. But if you have any issues uploading your documents, you should know that once you get through part 1, that is an on-time submission.
Tara, feel free to add any questions that you see.
Thank you, Addie. One of the questions I saw, and I'm not sure if we know the answer to this yet, Sue, is how will they be notified if they were awarded in round 4 or if they were not? I know that they won't be waitlisted on round 4.
So the short answer is I don't have that information yet about what the notifications will be from Lendistry, but we encourage everybody to continue to check their email regularly, and can't stress enough, especially if you used an alternate email address, that perhaps you were doing a second application and you chose a seldom used email address. Please monitor all the email addresses that you may have used, and be sure to check your junk mail filters and your spam in order to make sure that you catch all of those communications from Lendistry. A little bit about how the selection process works is that Lendistry, at the close of the round, will begin application review. Once you are selected, you will be contacted by Lendistry for any or all missing documents or any other questions they may have about your application. You'll be given an opportunity to upload any documents that they require that aren't with your original application. And then you'll be contacted to upload your banking information. You can certainly upload your banking information earlier in the process. It does make awards go faster on the other end, but you want to be sure to upload your banking information, as was noted earlier, for an ACH and not a wire transfer when you're asked for that. I also want to stress to please look carefully at any communications that you receive. There sadly are some fraudsters out there. If you're looking for information, please be sure that you go to careliefgrant.com to reach Lendistry. There are some other websites that have addresses that are similar but not identical to that, and they are fraudulent. There are also some characters out there sending fraudulent emails. So note that your communications will come from lendistry.com and not from other addresses.
Thank you so much, Sue. And I know there's still 195 questions to be answered. Many of them are duplicates. So I'm hoping that you already got your answer. If you did not, please reach out to any one of us and we're happy to answer your questions. Again, thank you guys for joining us. We appreciate it, and we hope this was of service to you in your application process.